Hello, I'm Krista McAllister, and welcome to Cerius Leadership. Whether you're growing your business or another area of your life into what you want it to be, I welcome you. I'm here today with John Eli. John's a CEO coach, board member, consultant, and strategic advisor. And I can tell you, all it takes is one conversation to realize the depth of experience he has in each of those areas. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's interesting. One of the most popular blogs I have ever done on our website is what's the difference between a board of advisors and a board of directors? But John, I know you have been on a number of boards. I'd love to talk through the differences between some of those and get into the purpose that they have for the company and the leadership.
Sure. It's interesting that the purpose of boards can vary a lot, and yet there's certain commonalities of it. Currently, I serve on 6 boards. 4 are fiduciary kind of standard boards. One's a board of advisor, and one is it's called a Committee of Business Advisors, a CBA. And that's part of a very complicated trust structure where the stock is all held by Generation 2 in a series of trusts. And the Committee of Business Advisors brings the business expertise to direct the shareholders how to vote their shares. So pretty complicated, long history led to that one. But we also act as a fiduciary representative for the shareholders going between them and the board. And so, for example, the CBA would vote the shares or direct the shareholders technically to vote them if we needed a change in the board or CEO or something of that sort.
Let's start with the fiduciary to make sure that we've got a common understanding of what that means when you say a more typical board.
Yeah.
What is the purpose or the meaning in this context of a fiduciary?
So fiduciary has to operate in the best interests of the shareholders. And to some extent, I would say the enlightened self-interest, because sometimes shareholders can act in their own individual. They don't have a fiduciary responsibility, but the board does. So a shareholder may act in a way that's in their own personal interest, and the board needs to kind of decipher that and determine what's in the interest of the shareholders collectively and what's in the best interest of the company. If you think of the company as the golden goose, some people want a lot of eggs, and that damages the health of the golden goose. So you need to balance all of that. Board of advisors, on the other hand, can give guidance, but I think it should be fiduciary, but not legally required to be. And the one board of advisors that I'm on, we talk about that, and the board agrees to act in a fiduciary manner. So the big difference becomes with a board of advisors, leadership doesn't have to do what you say. They can just take it as advice. Whereas fiduciary, they're obligated to do what the board wants, so long as the board is acting in the best interest of the shareholders.
Right. That's one of the more surprising things too, because I work with a lot of business owners, and the comment is, I don't want a board who's going to tell me what to do. Very big difference between a board of directors where there is a legal obligation and an obligation to do what is directed or requested, or you do have the authority to make management changes, versus a board of advisor where you really are there more to support the leadership for them to make those right decisions. Am I getting this?
Yeah, I think that's true. When I get told that, I say, well, I think you'd be better off if you did have a fiduciary board, because I was a CEO in past lives for 5 companies over 30 years. And some I had a board of directors and some I didn't. And I always, in my mind, acted as if I did. So I would write a letter to the board every month explaining what happened, what we thought was going to happen, what was different and why, and what we're going to do about it. So even if that wasn't going to a board, was just going to my file, I found that discipline extremely helpful in keeping on focus and not getting bothered from the day-to-day interruptions that happen, and letting the urgent overthrow the important. But I certainly get it that if it's been completely your own show, to suddenly have to report to somebody and answer to somebody, be held accountable can be unattractive. But your company will be better because of it, and you will be a better leader because of it.
Right. So there is always the option to have a board of advisors, but act as though they are a board of directors and you are accountable to them. That's a different mindset for maybe an owner who solely owns the company most of their of the entire time they've owned the company, to be accountable to someone. And yet, to me, that's one of the pillars or cornerstones of great leadership.
Yes. And someday you're not going to own the company, whether it's by a planned exit or by death or disability. And having that structure in place will make the company more valuable to a potential acquirer. And the performance of the company is definitely going to improve with that kind of oversight.
As you're looking at who should be on the board and you're balancing the various perspectives, we talk a lot about balancing your leadership team and the diversity of perspective. How similar is building a board and putting together those different perspectives and expertise to a leadership team? Because I know you've built a number of boards. Generally, you're the person they go to say, who should I have on my board?
Yeah, 3 of the boards I serve on, I put together. 2 of them I chair. And when I set out to do that, it was really, what are the challenges the company is facing? So I have one recently put together that they had a lot of HR conflicts. They didn't have good systems. They didn't have performance management systems. They didn't have a good compensation structure. And so I wanted to get that expertise. And I also like board members to have had experience being a CEO. Because if you've been a CEO and reported to a board, then you're going to be a lot more sensitive to where do you get involved and where you don't. There's a saying in the board world of nose in, fingers out. So you know what's going on, but you're not making management decisions. You're overseeing the decisions that management's making and making sure they get made. And sometimes if you bring in a CEO who's not had a board, they are very decisive. That's what you want in a good CEO, but that's not the role of the board. You give direction of what needs to be done, but then management does it. So that's why I like CEOs who've reported to a board. They're more sensitive to that. This company also had some sales problems, so we brought in another CEO who came up through the sales ranks and now has a sales consulting company. It's very much about process. And then it was a tech company, so we wanted to have another voice that really understood product life cycles and accelerating change and all the things that come with technology. And then we had 2 shareholders and the CEO make up the board. So we had outside control, but all the stakeholders represented.
And I'm seeing a trend there as to the individuals where they've had the experience, they've done the role, they've been in it on a day-to-day, but they've since transitioned to doing it from the outside or advising or consulting or being on boards. And they understand the difference between walking someone down the path and helping them get there from the outside and from more of an advisory perspective versus jumping in and wanting to hold their hand and do it with them. Because I've seen that with a lot of executives. Some can do it from the outside very well, and some just can't help but put their fingers in.
Once you've been in charge, it's very hard not to be. And if you've been successful, you probably feel you have more skills and knowledge than the CEO in a particular area. But if you act on that, you weaken the CEO and you weaken the company. So you're taking away rather than adding value to it. And it's a hard choice, and particularly if you're directing a CEO that something needs to be done and they're just not doing it.
And I'm curious, I think that you'd have some great insights as to kind of coaching CEOs on how to effectively work with the board. Because I'm guessing you've worked with a number of either first-time CEOs or CEOs first time working with the board, and that's a big transition.
Huge transition. Some of my CEOs I also separately coach. And
Okay.
when I'm doing that, it's about helping them be more successful, which comes into working with the board, as opposed to when I'm wearing my board hat, it's all about making the company more successful. And occasionally those two things conflict, and when they do, we talk about it. It's okay. I can't go there because what's in your best interest and what's in the company's best interest in this case may not be the same. Like if they're talking about, should I be here or should I leave? I really can't get into that from a coaching perspective. But I can help them think through how they could better react to those pressures that are making them feel they want to leave, if in fact they're a keeper. So that the job of the CEO includes managing the board. They should be the ones riding the chairman. The CEO and I meet prior to board meetings and go over the agenda. We talk about what the action items in the last one meeting were to make sure that they're followed up on. And we kind of collaborate on that, but they should be running the show and they should be providing information to the board so the board can make better decisions. I worked with one CEO who felt that the board all came from outside the industry, so everything they brought to bear was irrelevant. It was only his industry experience, and that it was a waste of his time to have to explain it. In that case, it's going to be very hard for that CEO to be effective and successful long term. He's got to make those board members as expert as he is.
And that's an ongoing debate, whether it's with leadership or with the board. The tendency is I need someone from my industry who understands it and can either one, bring introductions, or two, I don't have to spend time bringing them up to speed. It seems like every month, but it really isn't. Once you're up to speed, you're up to speed.
Right.
Is there a balance that you recommend having, whether you've got them there as advisors or board of directors, having that industry insight or that outside perspective and bringing other industry?
Yeah. It really depends on the company and what their real challenges are. Thinking that seasoned business professionals don't understand the business, I think, is an excuse and a cop-out. And it doesn't take that much to understand what the business is, as long as you're asking the questions. How is this the same as other businesses? How is it different? And the why. And quite often it's asking that why question that's off-putting to the CEO because they can't answer it. If they can't answer it, then pretty quickly that becomes part of the board's expertise. So if a company's floundering in an industry, I've got a company that their technology, they're a product company, the technology is changing rapidly. And we brought in onto the board a couple of people with industry experience simply for that reason. They can understand how is it changing, why is it changing, where can we find places where we fit better. But then we've also brought in outside consultants who can help with that.